Thank you to every one of you who have made time to tune in with us today. My name is Celina Alvarez, and I am the Executive Director at Housing Works. We hope that this adventure that we're about to take you on will help you understand more about the work that we do on a day-to-day basis, the work that has been done, the work that is being done, the work that we continue to strive to achieve. Let's take a trip down memory lane and let's learn about where everything started with Housing Works.
Hi, Karol. It's great to see you. Yeah. And I think we're okay in this social distancing. We'll be able to be safe and take our masks off, so it's a little bit easier to hear. Exactly.
All right. But I'm not supposed to hug you or anything
exactly.
like that, right? Okay.
Yep. We'll elbow bump at the end. Right.
Got it.
So my name is Mary Kirchen, as you know, and I am called the founder of Housing Works.
But we'll
get into the story. So, right. And I'm also a member of the Immaculate Heart Community. We, as a community, had the privilege of being part of the founding of this organization. And let me invite you, Karol, to say a few words about who Immaculate Heart Community is.
So I'm Karol Schulkin, and I am a member of the Immaculate Heart Community and have been in the community now 49 years. Had the opportunity to find this community amazingly. The community actually came from Olat, Spain in 1848, and it's an interesting story because the community was really founded by a priest who had been listening to people in church and in confession and hearing stories of women being abused, basically, and violated, and having no opportunity for education or training. And he was very moved by that. And so he founded a community of women who had some education because they came from a more middle class and upper class culture, and with the idea to start schools to make education available for women. So right from the beginning, the community saw a need and moved to attempt to address that need. So very shortly after the founding, 10 missionary sisters, teachers, came to California. They thought they were coming to Los Angeles because the bishop here wanted them to come to establish a Catholic school system, and they wound up in Gilroy.
The garlic capital of the world.
Yeah, that's the place. And they, it wasn't just a stopping point, because the powers that be there within the church said, no, we need schools too, stay here. So they did establish some schools, but shortly thereafter did come to Los Angeles and founded what was at St. Viviana's Cathedral School, the first Catholic school in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And so we've been in the field of education for many years. We founded Immaculate Heart High School in 1906, I believe. It's still there, corner of Western and Franklin, and very shortly after the founding of the high school, opened up Immaculate Heart College right up the hill, and that became known as a place for thought and social engagement and art, because then Sister Carita was one of the heads of the art department, and so there was just this great flowering, I would say, of the community. And you were part of that.
It was the 60s.
It was the 60s, and the community heard the invitation from John the 23rd to throw open the windows. And honey, we threw open the windows, we threw open the doors.
And we couldn't close them.
And we couldn't and didn't want to close them. And that, I mentioned that because if it were not for that, I wouldn't be in a
That's right.
community.
That's right.
Certainly not this one, because I came to faith in a Protestant context with a Jewish father and Protestant mother who almost went as a missionary to China, but she married my father. And so when I was on my journey looking for community and a way to be of service in the world, somebody told me about this community, and the community was meeting in assembly and decided they wouldn't advertise about opening the doors to others, other Christians, but if anybody came knocking, they'd consider it. I came. And what's so important to me in that, aside from how it transformed my life, and to think now I'm in a leadership role in this community, is pretty amazing. Says a lot about the embrace of the community and their willingness to stretch beyond the familiar boundaries to include others in what has become a challenging, amazing, joyful, life-giving journey.
And so with the Roman Catholic history, we are an ecumenical community.
We are indeed.
We are a Christian community, and that's pretty much our only boundary. Women, men, married, single,
Right.
gay, straight, ordained, not ordained, you name it. And the boundary is Christianity. And being rooted in Jesus, we build relationships with people of other faiths. But those relations strengthen our Christianity.
Absolutely. And with the understanding, certainly, of the teachings of Jesus, that we open our arms to embrace our brothers and sisters on the journey. And we look for ways to do that.
And looking for a way to do that was the birth of Housing Works.
Exactamo. Yes. Yeah. And thank you for bringing an unthought of idea, a new mission to the community when you did.
While I continue to be a board member, which I'm really proud to be, the leadership of our organization is absolutely stellar, because we're there in every avenue. We're there for advocacy, working with our legislation folks. We're there for the relationships with our participants, which is the most important aspect of who we are. And we're there to create a model of how it is that hope in the midst of this crisis is truly alive.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, God, please, in these times, that message be heard, and that people become part of stirring up that hope with one another.
Hi, ladies.
Hey, Celina! I better put my mask back on.
Oh no, I better get it.
I am so grateful that the two of you are telling this story. I'm so proud to know that the ministry of the work that we do here at Housing Works is truly that. You know, in nonprofit work, we're not allowed to proselytize, and that's not what we're doing here. But it's this idea of community and really doing, as you described, God's work.
We get to create it together.
Yes, and this is, you know, the beautiful thing that I've experienced with the Immaculate Heart Community is that you are accepted as who you are and who you believe in.
Exactly.
Who we look to as a higher power is our journey. And I'm grateful that we're able to do that in community with the Immaculate Heart Community. And I understand it's your 50th Jubilee.
It is, of the new Immaculate Heart Community.
Yes, and
it
so
is.
we just want to take a moment to let you know that we are going to gift one of these prints to the Immaculate Heart Community in honor of your support and work over the years. And every time you look at this, you know where it comes from and you know what it means.
It's from here.
Yes.
This is community.
This is community.
There it is.
And I'm so grateful on behalf of the agency and where we are today. And I know Molly would feel the same way.
Love her.
We just are so grateful for all the work and all the support and all the love that the Immaculate Heart Community has bestowed amongst us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
And
that.
you are one heck of a leader.
I've been fortunate, I was fortunate enough to be mentored by some really amazing people, Molly of which was one of them, John Best of which was another, and you, Mary Kirchen, you keep showing up for me every step of the way.
Yeah.
It's a privilege.
And I'm so thankful for that. Thank you, Karol Schulkin and Mary Kirchen, and to the rest of the Immaculate Heart Community for everything that has been done over the course of the history of the last 17 years here with Housing Works, but more so for all the work that has been done relevant to social justice in the community. Now let's learn about the work that our wonderful staff is doing on the front lines every day.
My name is Maria de Jesus Gomez. My role is a lead support worker here at 88th and Vermont. My connection to 88th and Vermont is unbelievable. I have no way of describing it because back in 1992, this building was a smaller building called Community Build, a community service building that provided services for those people who came out of the riots in 1992, and I worked here for 15 years providing case management to families and folks who experienced adversity due to the riots in 1992. And now coming back into this building at 88th and Vermont, 30 years later, it's unbelievable because it puts me back into a case management position. Just working here in this building that has rebirthed because it just looks totally different. It came from being office space and a resource center to a living space for people experiencing homelessness. It's just beautiful. I can't describe how emotionally touches me. Thank you, Housing Works. This means a lot to me to be able to see myself grow as well in all aspects of my life. I started working here at Housing Works about 2 years ago, but I came to 88th and Vermont about a month ago. And within that month, it's, first of all, it was the peak of the COVID-19. And I was wondering, how am I gonna work from home and house people from home and with all this social distance, what is that gonna look like? If we're smiling, people are not able to see our smiles. Now we really have to depend on our eyes on our side to connect with people. I've come to learn that in some ways we're still connecting. We have moved in 10 people, and that means we have gotten people off the streets, 10 people, and COVID didn't prevent us from doing that. This did not prevent us from providing services to people that are experiencing homelessness in this very moment. And it's a blessing. I think it's a beautiful thing that we were able to provide housing even in these conditions, even under these circumstances.
My name is Monique Jordan, Enrichment Service Coordinator here at 88th in Vermont. 88th in Vermont is a 66-unit property to help people who are homeless get off the streets and to help people who have special needs get off the streets as well. The purpose of a Enrichment Service Coordinator is to help bring the community together by hosting events and hosting support groups and to make people feel comfortable. I got started doing enrichment service work by taking a peer specialist class for 8 weeks, hosted by Housing Works. I took that class learning about self-harm reduction and just learning how to deal with people who've been in the same position as me as far as homelessness and also special needs. This role helps me a lot because I've been in the same position as most of the participants here. Housing Works has helped me get housed, helped me get a job, helped me feel like me again. And I think me having this role can help someone else feel great again as well. And just to be there hand by hand and never leave them. They always have that support, and I think that's what is very, very important with my role. Being here, being in the midst of the pandemic during the COVID-19 has been actually a great thing. We're still moving people in, even though all of this is going on. People are still getting housed. Also, I have been able to talk more to participants over virtual videos, and I think it's actually bringing everyone even closer here. I believe that people who are living in single self-setting deserves to have enrichment service coordinator. Let them know they have someone here to help them. When it comes to my role with helping a case manager here, I think that it plays out very well. We can work with each other, and so I have the fun job compared to a caseworker who has to deal with doctor's appointments. I'm more, let's have fun with the participants and take them out and do special events with them.
My name is William Jackson. My role is as a street outreach worker for Housing Works California, SPA 3, Pasadena. My job consists of helping match individuals, those who are experiencing homelessness, with permanent supportive housing. The experience of going out and looking for individuals, even searching them out, right? Because first we have to find these individuals. Where are they at? Where are they within the city? And then once we locate these areas where those who are experiencing homelessness are, it's then engaging them. And myself, having had experience being homeless, I understand some of the nuances, and then also just how to approach individuals as one of them, not necessarily as someone just out there trying to find the homeless, which is fantastic, but as someone who has been homeless, finding those who are now also experiencing homelessness. And so that helps to resonate with them. I've noticed, just in how I approach, how I speak to them. And once I share a little bit of my own story, how they relax and are able to drop their guard a little bit. And then that opens up for a greater conversation, and then how I can then begin to introduce them to what services exist. What it's like when I'm first engaging those who are experiencing homelessness, sometimes it could be different feelings that arise for me. When I'm going out and doing outreach, I bring my own experiences of having been homeless. And so that can be a trigger, and being conscious of that, I make sure to transmute that into something useful, both for myself and those who are experiencing homelessness, so that when I engage these individuals, it resonates with them, that this is someone who's been where they're at, and it makes them more comfortable in engaging me, talking to me, sharing their story, as I also share my story with them. Because it's not just a story that I can tell, it's a story that they can see and they can feel. The importance of permanent housing in and of itself is that once we get them into this place, thinking of the Housing First model, it's once we get them there, being that level and that foundation of support and helping them get to where they want to go, where they need to go. Not necessarily forcing things upon them. This is what it's got to look like. But rather facilitating the change and the transformation necessary within that particular individual, how it manifests for them in the most healthiest manner. So the time frame can really vary. It can really vary. but every step is pivotal, every step is meaningful, even the ones that are going backward. So just like the saying, I think it was Franklin that said, sometimes you have to stoop down to leap forward. That is something that we definitely keep in mind within this process.
Hey everybody, Adam Conover here. Apologies for the long hair. I have not had a haircut since the beginning of coronavirus, like I'm sure a lot of you haven't as well. But I want to thank all of you so much for coming to join this online event in support of Housing Works California and their incredible work. I just want to tell you a little bit about what they're accomplishing. So far, they are in the process of housing or supporting 577 people. They're about to lease 3 new properties, which will support an additional 200 more. They're delivering 1,000 meals a week, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, they have moved 15 people into permanent supportive housing and 7 people into interim housing. It's incredible work, but they need your help to do it. We need your help to do it. So if you can, please donate to help their incredible work. You can do that by texting HOME to 56512. I'm going to say that again. Text HOME to 56512 or go to their website, housingworksca.org. Thank you so much. And now on with the show. Before we go on with the show, text HOME to 56512. Thank you so much. And now on with the show.
So you've just learned what it takes to get people off the streets and into housing. That's only the first step. Housing is the first step. What happens next when an individual finds themselves amongst the 4 walls and not really having an understanding or a sense of clarity as to where they're headed next? We're going to take you on a little trip to learn about Andy Ledesma and the amazing way that his life has begun to flourish as he's been stably housed over the last couple of years.
My name is Andy Ledesma. I am an artist, muralist, and social activist. I guess the earliest recollection I have of art was when I was a young child. I was rather rambunctious, maybe a little bit hyperactive. My father was a minister, and he would travel from town to town doing sermons and stuff, and I would interrupt and deliver the punchline before his joke was finished, and he would have to ad-lib. And so my mother started to bring pencil, papers, crayons, and to distract me, she would draw with me. And this became a little ritual. And this started about maybe 4 or 5, and then by the time I was 6 or 7, a parishioner came up to me and observed all the papers that I had drawn, and he liked a particular one. He says, "Can I buy this?" And so I sold my first piece of work at about 7 years old for $0.25. So from that moment on, I pretty much knew I wanted to do art. When we moved to LA, I was exposed to art on a grander scale. I was born in Texas, a small town in the Panhandle. We moved to East LA, and I started running into big murals, but I had never seen art being done about my culture. This was at a point when Los Angeles was going through a bunch of civil unrest. I remember the walkouts. I remember when they shot Salazar. He was a drinking buddy of my father's. I remember when I was 9, we were downtown. I was 9 with my dad, and we were protesting the United Farm Workers. As we were marching, I remember being pelted with rotten tomatoes and just all kinds of things being thrown at us. So that aspect of always having to be a part of the community stuck with me. And so I struggled to find a place where I belong, a home, so to speak. And I found that in the Chicano art movement. And so I think it was in 2002, I was the first self-published comic book artist out of East LA, and I did a book called La La Land, and it was an anthology. And every issue would feature about 10, 15 artists. I wanted to realize the magazine, but even more important was my mural career. I started off by apprenticing. My first apprentice was with an artist named Jerry Rodriguez, and we focused a bunch of historic cultural murals in Lincoln Heights. And after about 4 years, I started my own mural crew. I resided on Figueroa, on Avenue 57 in Figueroa. I was witness to perhaps one of the most iconic Chicano art booms, and it had a great impact on not only the city, but I think the whole nation and the world, because a lot of different ideas would get started in that nexus. Every decision I've ever made in my life, I would like to think it was for a greater good, if at all possible. Once I started to branch off onto my own, I was able to do some pretty iconic murals. There's one that still stands today, Avenue 61 and Figueroa, The Wall That Talks. It's been in the media because as Highland Park goes through gentrification and they whitewashed all the murals that had any kind of Chicano theme, we fought tooth and nail, sometimes amongst ourselves, but we, to this date, going on 24 years, they haven't touched that mural. Housing Works got into my life. My life really took a dramatic turn. I was able to get housed, and it had been about 6-7 years since I had dealt with my art seriously. And by getting a little bit of the stability that they provided, I was able to reignite my art career. I started by restoring the mural on Avenue 61, and a lot of that was controversial, and it's continuing to this day because we were speaking out against gentrification. And so I was able to get back into my activism. And something near to my heart is part of what we do in Housing Works. And I say we because I feel I'm a part of that, because it's given me something that I really cherish, and that's a chance to impact other people. I've always taught art and mentored other artists, and I've always thought that art is a good therapeutic tool. I am looking forward that the project that we have on tap is last year we wrote a grant, and the grant was going to be focused on the new facility at 88th and Washington. It's going to be at 88th and Vermont, and this is a new facility, and it's specifically to get people into housing, help them to transition. And I thought it would be a very good idea to deal with all kinds of issues and to do it through art. There's 3 components. One of them is to create through paper mache, and that whole process is a metaphor for transformation. And then there's a second part, that's to do painted self-portrait. That painting should reflect them, and it doesn't necessarily have to be figurative. And as we're putting this curriculum forward, and so it's kind of like a personal inventory, and then they could hang it on their wall and they could see it. And then the third part, I've always put together zines. During the process, they're going to have a journal to kind of jot down ideas and sketches, and we're going to compile them, and then we're going to put together a zine based on their input. It'll be something that people can take with them. They will also plan their own show, and so we're going to curate an art show to display our zine and the 2 projects, a 3D sculpture and a painting. And in the second phase, we're going to take these ideas that we've learned and teach it to the community to take the stigma off of this facility and off of homelessness, and to show the brilliant minds, the good souls, and the creativity. And we're going to do all this while we're having fun. So I really look forward to this, because not only is it therapy for the participants, it's therapy for the community as well. And so as I continue on my journey, the one thing that's always there is my art and my belief for things to always get better.
Now, if that wasn't a story to inspire each of us, Andy is just one of the many stories that deserves to be told. We are so grateful that Andy took time in the midst of a pandemic to allow us access into just a glimpse of his life. I'm sure there's so much more that he did not share with us, and we hope to continue learning more about Andy. But as he shared, we are going to be doing some amazing work with Andy and his mentorship and leadership in the arts at 88th in Vermont. And we're looking to transform communities in such a impactful and positive way.
Greetings. My name is Bigbai Nejnima. I am a cultural activist, and I've been given the honor of contributing to this important discussion that's taking place. The necessary things that must happen in order to achieve the goals is to understand the notion of balance, and how this balance is not necessarily with the society, but it's within ourselves, and becoming more balanced. I prepared a piece that I would like to share with you that speaks to this balance that is a necessary component to accomplish anything that we set our collective intentions to accomplish. What makes this world go round is harmony. It's a divine balance of everything you see. We're all connected anyway, energetically. So if I hurt you, I'm really hurting me. If you have the dark, you gotta have the light. The sun in the day, the soft moon at night. But one without the other can't exist. They depend on each other, total opposites. Violence in the streets is necessary. What inspires us to all want peace is necessary. We can't separate the good from the bad. We can't wish for something that we never had. People who really care are necessary. But taking more than your share, was that necessary? Suffering in your life is necessary. At some point, we all sacrifice because it's necessary. So you say someone broke your heart. That was necessary. Did it give you a brand new start? So necessary. If it's truth that you seek, it's necessary, then it's truth you have to teach because it's necessary. What goes around comes around. Necessary. What once was lost will be found because it's necessary. Believing in yourself is necessary, but you're going to need somebody's help because it's necessary. Rise up, be proud. It's necessary because there's a king in every crowd because it's necessary. It's time to stand up on your feet. Yes, it's necessary. Time to show more integrity. We have to see that it's necessary. Like the sunshine needs the rain, feel the joy, live the pain. In life, we must realize it's not the destination, the journey is the prize. But at every moment on the earth's face, light and darkness occupy the same space because it's necessary. Thank you.
Hey everybody, Adam here one more time, just asking you again to please with me, take out your phone, get out that wallet, and support Housing Works California and their incredible work. I mean, if you live in LA, and I'm thinking you probably do, you know how serious the situation is right now out on our city's streets. Your heart is tearing over it, you feel terrible, you wish there was something you could do. Well, guess what? This is your chance to do something. Get out that phone and text HOME to 56512 or go to housingworksca.org to make your donation. That number again, HOME to 56512. Thank you so much for your support. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Thank you again.
As we move into the third and final segment of tonight's event, I want us to think about what we have seen unfold within our communities and across the nation and around the globe, the uprising that is happening as a result of the brutal way in which George Floyd was murdered. It is a time for revolutionary leadership. We're going to move into this last piece with an understanding of what it takes to think about breaking down systemic racism and dismantling oppressive systems. We have to recognize that the fish are sick. The groundwater is toxic and infected. The time is now to clear the mud, lift the fog, and make way for each person, one life, one person, one relationship at a time, doing whatever it takes for as long as it takes.
Hello, I'm Val Zavala. Welcome to the discussion on systemic racism. I'm here at Housing Works in Hollywood, and we'll be hearing from 4 esteemed experts on this issue. But I first want to say that we are socially distanced. So thank you for joining us. And with us here to discuss this really essential question are 4 experts. The first one is Celina Alvarez. She's the Executive Director of Housing Works. She joined Housing Works in 2008 as one of the first members of the nationally recognized Mobile Integrated Service Team, or MIST. MIST serves individuals experiencing chronic homelessness, doing whatever it takes for as long as it takes to move them off the streets and into housing. Also with us is Saba Mwine. Saba has over 16 years experience spearheading projects throughout our nation that measure, investigate, and enforce equal access to housing. Currently, she's Senior Program Manager with the Corporation for Supportive Housing, and when she trains and advises organizations on racial equity. Also with us is Roland Palencia. Roland is the Community Benefits Director and a corporate trainer at LA Care Health Plan, the largest public health plan in the nation. He is the former Executive Director at Clinica Monsignor Oscar Romero and Equality California. He was born and raised in Guatemala and came to the U.S. in the mid-70s. He has a BA in History from UCLA and a Master's of Humanities, and he's a candidate also at Pacific Graduate Institute in Montecito and expecting to graduate this August. Peter Lynn led the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority for 5 years through 2019. This was a period of tremendous change when funding levels rose from 75 to 402 million. Peter focused LAHSA on evidence-based practices and on implementing a coordinated entry system. During his tenure, LAHSA went from a pass-through contract administrator to the central strategic partner in alleviating homelessness in Los Angeles. Welcome all of you to this panel. We are experiencing outrage, good outrage in this country like we have not seen for a long time over racism. And the word systemic racism or institutional racism keeps coming up in all these discussions. But what does that really mean? Because most people, when they think of racism, they think of a one-on-one experience, someone in a store or in a particular situation that's rude to them or dismisses them. They think of racism as a very personal experience, but it's deeper than that. How would we'll start with you, Roland. What does it mean when they say systemic racism?
So, for me, what it means, and obviously there are many working definitions, but what it means is that it's embedded in systems. We live in systems. As a matter of fact, we are born into a system. We're born in a hospital. We're born or even at home. There's a whole structure that supports, us coming into this world. And, we're born into neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are made up of systems. So, for instance, let's just think about access to healthy and affordable food. In many neighborhoods, they call them food deserts, meaning that, people generally buy their food from a liquor store. So in order for someone in a certain zip code, and a zip code is a system, whether we like to think of it or not, because clearly if you're born in this zip code, let's say 90011, as opposed to 90210, you can pretty much determine the health condition of that person up to the age of 65 and beyond. So, but let's say someone in 9011, given this food desert situation and not really having access to, to safely exercise in the neighborhood because of, a lot of social conditions there, that person has to drive like 4 miles away. If they want to go to a gym, they gotta go like 5 miles away. And so that person has to have 10 times more willpower to be healthy than someone that by default in 90210 is so much easier. So that, gives you a contrast as to how one environment, a systemic environment, supports certain individual families, communities, versus the other one. So I really look at it, how much willpower, it's almost something that we can measure, does it take for me to be healthy in this zip code versus this zip code?
Saba, how would you describe institutional racism?
Well, I love that Roland talked about zip codes, because it really is the legacy of policies, and our country was founded on slavery and genocide, and that ideology and that narrative maintains itself through policies like redlining, and I think that one's a really important one to name, the practice of whereby there were literally lines drawn around neighborhoods where black and brown people lived, and those neighborhoods were deemed unsafe and unworthy of resources and investment, and those lines maintain themselves very clearly still today.
Even if they're officially removed, but not.
Exactly. So in terms of access to resources, it's another way we can think it's a lack of access to resources to live well. And so if you think about where you live, like Roland was saying, your access to healthy food, your proximity to gainful employment, the way that our schools are set up, whereby housing taxes go to pay for the public system, and if you're in a place where there isn't a lot of home ownership, then that system for funding your child's education is less. And so all these things are collective, and we see the impact of structural racism in data for people of color in our society.
I think you said it very well. We're born into systems. People don't realize that. Systems, layers and layers of systems. We're part of the moment we're born.
We're born, we're raised, and we die in systems.
Celina, how does institutional racism relate to homelessness?
So this whole topic has gotten me really thinking quite frequently. I think about frontline workers all the time, and I think about the people that we serve daily. And I think about the correlation between the two, because often I frame the idea that the people who are doing the serving are the vulnerable helping the vulnerable. And so there's, when we look at the numbers of people on the street, just last week we heard, we received the news in Los Angeles County that homelessness is up by 12%. And so the numbers that we actually know of, this does not include people that are off the grid, but we have 66,000 people, human beings living on the streets on any given night at this point. In LA County. In LA County, 66,000. Yes. The rate of seniors who have become homeless in the last year has also increased. Then we look at Black folks who are on the street. There's this disparity of the fact that 8%, correct me if I'm wrong, 8% of the population in LA County are Black. Yet 33% of the 66,000 people on the streets are Black folks.
So it's almost 4 times representation in the homeless sector as in the regular population.
Exactly.
Incredible. Peter, you were head of LAHSA, which is really the organization overseeing all the homeless services. They're probably the single biggest coordinating organization. Did you see institutional racism within the policies or within the practices, intentional or unintentional, in terms of how we dealt with our homeless?
I think you have to look upstream from the people who are experiencing homelessness to all of the drivers and the factors that contribute to homelessness. And we see racism embedded within all those systems. Within the system of housing affordability, LA is one of the least affordable housing markets in the United States, and the impact of that falls disproportionately on people of color, but especially Black people. There is discrimination in access to apartments. There is discrimination in that goes back to redlining, when neighborhoods were defunded in order to support homeownership for white households in other neighborhoods. Black households couldn't get mortgages, couldn't get housing. Those neighborhoods have continuously been underfunded. Black households have been disenfranchised from access to wealth maintenance and wealth contributions like homeownership, like small business loans that were afforded to white Americans and not to Black Americans. We saw it across the country in the defunding of farms. Those are traditionally the 3 ways that American households generated and maintained wealth: were home ownership, farm ownership, and small business. Each of those was systemically denied to African Americans. In addition, though, you have a gap in access to healthcare. So a lot of challenges that folks that face where they may have personal issues do not get addressed because of inequitable access to healthcare and also racism within the healthcare system. But the most damaging system that we have with regard to direct contribution to homelessness, it looks like the criminal justice system. We have rampant disproportionality in enforcement of our criminal justice system, such that if you look at the disproportionalities of population, again, 8% of Angelenos are Black, 30% of our jail population is Black. That is a focused enforcement effort. It is systemic racism. You don't have to have individual police officers being racist if you over-concentrate enforcement and you over-enforce on street-level offenses. Now we have people getting incarcerated. The incarceration rates for Black people are greater than non-Black people. Once you're incarcerated, the sentences are longer for Black people than for non-Black people. Once you're out, the enforcement on community supervision is more stringent on Black people than non-Black people. So all of those things stack. Once you've been incarcerated, you have greatly diminished prospects for access to jobs. You can be openly discriminated against in the housing market, whereas there is illegal discrimination with regard to access in housing against Black people. You have legal discrimination against people who have a criminal background, and that stacks. All of those things stack. You have worse access to jobs, you have legal discrimination in the employment and the housing sectors. All of those effects stack. And so if we look at people who are experiencing homelessness, they are the recipients of all of the different ills of our culture, but institutional racism, contributes in massive ways to all of those factors. If you look at the systems within addressing people who are experiencing homelessness, the offer of services and the uptake of services is relatively proportionate across different groups within the homeless service sector. So, we're offering services to people at relatively proportionate rates. We're offering, people are enrolled in programs at proportionate rates across the whole system. Within individual programs, there can be disparities, and those need to be addressed. So we use those data to look at, it looks like you're underserving this community. What's going on there? How are people being trained? Are you sending them to other people? But across the entire system, there is reasonably good proportionality that is not against the general population, but against the ethnic mix of the people who are experiencing homelessness. Where they're not is on whether people can retain their housing. And that is something where we saw twice the returns to homelessness for formerly homeless Black people than non-Black people. So you're dealing with a number of different factors there. Is that disproportionate enforcement by landlords? Is it again just lack of access to jobs and other benefits based on these other attributes? Or is it failure to provide good case management that keeps people housed? So those are all things that we need to really pull into within the sector and make sure that we are working diligently and consistently at anti-racist policies to keep people housed.
Are we at a turning point that will really become institutionalized change? Now, we see a lot of outrage, which is fantastic, but outrage is like raw energy. Are we at a point where we can address some of these institutional problems? Because we're angry over one individual police officer's murder of the Black man. But you're telling me that's not really where the issue is. Yes, we have to reform the police. But how do we take this outrage and turn it into institutional change?
I mean, this particular, and I even though it's harsh language, I like to call it a modern day lynching because that's exactly what it is. As Black people have been experiencing this, like we periodically see people being murdered and lynched by the police. The thing that's different in my view, in following our conversation on race over the course of my career about this particular incident was the fact that the way that it was filmed, there was just such a disregard for this man's life. And I think it may be also because we were all, those of us who had the means to stay at home, many of us don't have that comfort, but the fact that many of us were cloistered in our homes and are experiencing this sort of angst of witnessing something so egregious, it just became this international phenomenon and moment. And so I feel personally a lot of pressure and movement to really take a hold of this moment. This disproportionate representation of Black people and Native people in the homeless population goes across our country. And it's been that way for decades upon decades. So this isn't new to those of us that are of color and that have been working on this issue. But what's exciting is that it feels as though it's not just us that are recognizing this. Now, systems maintain themselves. And so it's going to take that amount of collective movement in order to really change a system that's ideology is founded in oppression. When I think about the homeless sector and I think about Los Angeles, and many people are looking to us as a sector that, the way that we've been, the ad hoc committee report on Black people experiencing homelessness, the way that we've been seeking and moving to unpack this, we can move forward with that brilliant report that basically was all the data in there were from the people who have the experiences of homelessness and structural racism. And so we really need to learn from those people, put those people in leadership positions. One very efficient way that we can address structural racism by taking action is to put Black and brown people in leadership roles, because essentially part of the problem that we're seeking to solve is that the power is not held with Black and brown people. And so we need to, they have the experiences. They know what it's like to walk into this world as a person of color. And so we need that nuance in leadership. And that's why it's so, I really support, and love Celina's leadership, because she really exemplifies holding those lived experiences and recognizing them in the way that she does her work. So we need to recognize racial trauma as something that is I think, since in Los Angeles, the majority of people who are experiencing homelessness are people of color. And so we have to comport ourselves to serve that and to recognize that. And that means having a caseworker that looks like you. And also having an executive director that looks like you. So you feel that you are part of this community. You're not othered when you walk in that door. Homelessness is a race issue. So especially in Los Angeles, where we have that disproportionality and the majority of people experiencing homelessness are people of color, we need to really take that knowledge and embed it in every action that we take. So, leadership, recognizing in our services that racial trauma is what we're working with, and really moving forward with the knowledge and the recognition that homelessness is a racial justice issue stemming from the birth of our country. And so that's what I hope that we can do as a system.
Can I just add something to that? Because as you were speaking, so many seeds of truth. I just want to say thank you for that. But one of the things that comes to mind for me when I think about leadership and people of color is that there's still a divide. Because it's a divide that we have to be mindful of, because I guess the message I want to get out there is it's not just putting people of color in there to say, we've got this going on and look at how robust our team looks.
Right.
But it's really about understanding, do those people in leadership understand where their frontline staff is coming from? Or is there still a disconnect? Because regardless of, we could speak hours about it, but when you make your way to the top, it's because of privilege. It's because of access to resources. And I'm mindful of that as a woman of color, as a younger woman of color in an executive platform. I'll tell you, I've never cried so much in my life. It has been one of the most brutal platforms to be a part of. And it's today what we see with this conversation happening. I feel hopeful because now I have a context. When I think about communities, I think about the fact that I can now have conversations in the West Texas town I grew up with, where I remind folks, come on folks, you don't remember, we had a hanging tree in the middle of town. For how many years? Up until how long ago? We grew up in a town where there was a tri-K club that only young white women of a certain class bracket could be part of. There's now space to have conversations that are so needed.
Roland and Peter, how do we turn this outrage, incredible energy, it's like raw energy, how do we take that outrage and turn it into policy?
So I think that's deeply strategic.
Val, that's deeply strategic. If you look at the strategic policy platform of the Movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter LA, they did 24,000 interviews with people across the community, asking people, what is it that you want from a budget, and what is it that you want in your community? So if you think about priorities, who is it that you are saying you are? If most of the resources that you have discretion over, obviously, you have to pay interest, you have to pay the entitlement programs, but the money that you get to decide, and more than half of it is funding the military, and the analog at the local level is on policing, the people's budget and the movement to defund police is strategically articulating the need to invest in people. It is time for bold actions and non-incrementalism, and I think that they have brilliantly captured that through years of organizing since Ferguson and years of work in community and deep leadership. It is a collective leadership model and not an individualistic one, which is very robust and quite frankly very Angelino. We have a much more, because of our governance structure, we're forced to work together much more and actually gives us more resilience. But it is a really important thing to focus on, is what budgets say and where money goes. There's a very strategic understanding that we need to shift these monies away. And I think that, that movement has gotten tremendous traction just within a couple weeks of this catalytic moment. And I think that is, we really have to look at the power of the organizing, the power of the depth of the work that's been done to create that strategy.
Final thoughts on the homeless problem, because right now all this outrage and energy is focused on the police. But we're here also to be very concerned about the homeless. Now, the homeless and the police interact a lot. So where do you see are the key changes that can be made, that can take this energy, key policy changes or institutional changes that will address the homeless problem in the wake of all this amazing social uprising?
Well, there's a couple of things that come to mind for me. It's, I think, education. I think disparity of wages. I think the accessible, everyone's right to housing. What's the stat that 600,000 Angelinos are paying 90% of their household income towards rent? I mean, if we think we have a problem now, what are we getting ready to see? And then let's think about the fact that we're in the midst of a pandemic. And the number of people that have lost jobs that won't have jobs to go back to. That's not counting the people that are chronically homeless living on the streets who have been there for years and years and years. So we have to do different by our mental health system that is inadequate and inaccessible on a lot of levels. We have to do different about the way that we think about criminal justice. We have to think different about the ways that we're making education accessible to individuals. And we have to really live true to the spirit of community. So we have to do, we have to unite. We have to, as nonprofits, start unifying and really having a collective voice to push systems to understand the contractual obligations that are perpetuating oppressive and traumatic practices. We have to be more vocal and we have to demand change.
In LA, the LAPD budget is $1.8 billion. And I just think dollar signs, like, well, if we're going to defund, like, yeah, because police are asked to do a lot of this, or somehow put in the position to do work with people that are on the streets, and they don't have the skills and training that someone that works for an organization like Celina's does. So can we get some of that money to the right people that know how to do this work and that can be supported in doing this work and can have salaries that can sustain their livelihood in this city that's so expensive to live? If they have support, they'll be able to have a way to maintain their mental health, because then there's the secondary trauma. And then one of the things that people experience in these agencies, they burn out. And they also can't afford the wages to live based on the wages they're receiving. So part of me feels like, well, here we go, guys. Can we get some of that money and put that toward homeless services in our county?
We've seen that from union leadership in police unions saying, you're asking us to do all these things. Like, this is a moment to say, well, okay, we could do that with other people. We could put social workers doing, work with people who are experiencing homelessness and take you out of that business. I think there's a good matchup between those statements.
I'd like to have a call to action for all nonprofits in not just Los Angeles, but throughout the United States, to really think about the idea of revolutionary leadership. Now is the time. Now is the time for us to impact change. Now is the time for us to speak up on issues that we've been suppressing. And so let's unite and walk together and all become revolutionary leaders. Thank you.
Beautifully said. Thank you all so much for being here and for sharing your thoughts, and we hope that those watching have found this conversation to be most valuable. Thank you so much. I'm Val Zavala.
I thank you sincerely for joining us tonight. This is the launching pad for one of many conversations that will soon start to take place. Housing Works will be hosting a dialogue once a month via podcast or live stream so that we can talk about the issues at hand. Thank you. And before we close out, I'd like to turn it over to Adam Conover one last time.
Hey everybody, Adam Conover here again. I need to shout out some of our incredible sponsors for tonight's event. First of all, as our title sponsors, we have Emanate Health and the Robert Sprague Foundation. Please give them a little remote social distancing applause from your home. Thank you so much. Thank you to Emanate Health and the Robert Sprague Foundation, and our empowerment sponsors, the Light Body Foundation, Anne and Michael Mulvihill, and the Gwaine Gibbard and Lois M. Sprague Family Foundation. A rousing round of applause for them as well. Applaud right into your computers and microphones. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors for raising so much money for Housing Works and for making tonight's event possible.
So many things I've got to tell you, but I'm afraid I don't know how. 'Cause there's a possibility you look at me differently, love. Ever since the first moment I spoke your name, from then on I knew that by you being in my life, things were destined to change. 'Cause love, so many people use your name in vain. Love, those who have faith in you sometimes go astray. Oh, love, yeah. Through all the ups and downs of joy and hurt, love, for better or worse, I still will choose you first. Oh, many days I've longed for you, wanting you, hoping for the chance to get to know you. I longing for your kiss, for your touch, your feel, your presence. Many nights I've cried from the things you do. Oh, felt like I could die from the thought of losing you. I know that you're real, with no doubts and no fears and no questions. Love, 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 love. So many people use your name in vain, love. Those who have faith in you sometimes go astray. Oh, love, yeah. Through all the ups and downs of joy and hurt, love, for better or worse, I still will choose you first. At first you didn't mean that much to me, no, but now I know you're all I need. Oh, the world looks so brand new to me now that I fell in love. Every day I live for you, yeah, and everything that I do it for you. Oh, what I said is how I feel, so I believe it's true. You got to know I'm true.